I woke up because the room felt wrong. Not noisy, not bright, just wrong in that quiet, breath-held way that makes your body react before your brain catches up. My eyes adjusted slowly, dragged awake by instinct, and that's when I saw them. Handprints on the window, on the inside. Not smeared, not dirty, not the kind you leave by accident. These were clean impressions, palms pressed flat, fingers spread wide like whoever made them wanted to be seen. The window was locked. I know that because the first thing I did, after freezing long enough for my heart to start hurting, was stare at the latch. Still turned, still tight. My breath fogged the glass as I got closer, and for a second I thought maybe the prints would fade, like condensation tricks or sleep hallucinations. They didn't. They stayed sharp, outlined by the faint glow of the streetlight outside, glowing slightly where the glass was colder. I didn't call the police. I know that's what you're thinking. I thought it too. But something about the handprints stopped me. Maybe it was how high they were, higher than a child could reach without help. Maybe it was how narrow the palms were, too narrow to be mine. Or maybe it was the way my stomach dropped when I started counting fingers. 5 on the left, 4 on the right. One was missing. I stood there longer than I should have, counting again, like the number might change if I looked hard enough. It didn't. The room was silent except for my breathing, and even that felt too loud, like I was intruding. I checked behind me, expecting, hoping, something would be there to explain it. There was nothing. Just my bed, my dresser, my door still closed. You would have checked too. You would have tried to make sense of it, to fit it into something explainable. I did all of that, standing barefoot on cold carpet, staring at a window that suddenly felt less like a barrier and more like a suggestion. The worst part wasn't the fear. It was the certainty that whatever made those prints had been inside first. And the night before, everything had been normal. Before that night, my apartment was exactly what it had always been. Small, forgettable, safe in the way places become safe when nothing bad has ever happened there. One bedroom, one living room that smelled faintly like old coffee, a kitchen light that buzzed if you left it on too long. I'd lived there long enough to stop noticing it, which I think is the highest compliment you can give a place. It never surprised me. My nights followed the same routine. Lock the door, check it twice out of habit, not fear. Kick off my shoes by the couch. Scroll until my eyes burned. Insomnia wasn't new to me, so I'd learned to coexist with it. Background noise on low volume. Phone glowing inches from my face. City sounds drifting up from the street like distant static. Sirens. A bus braking. Someone laughing too loud and too late. The window in my bedroom was the most boring thing in the apartment. It faced an alley. Nothing scenic, nothing worth opening it for. I never did. It stuck anyway, warped just enough to complain if you tried. I kept the blinds half closed, more out of habit than privacy. No one could see in from that angle. Even if they could, there was nothing to see. The building itself was quiet. Old, but not creepy old. Just worn. Neighbors existed in theory more than reality. Footsteps through the ceiling sometimes. A door slamming somewhere down the hall. Muffled music that never lasted long enough to complain about. No one lingered. No one watched. It wasn't that kind of place. That's why I trusted it. I trusted the locks because they'd never failed. Trusted the walls because nothing had ever knocked back. Trusted the window because it was solid, thick glass that stayed the same temperature no matter the season. That last part is important, even if I didn't think so then. My window never fogged from the inside. Ever. Even in winter. I remember noticing it once and shrugging it off, assuming it was insulation or airflow or some boring explanation that didn't matter. Everything about my apartment had an explanation like that. Practical. Predictable. That's what made it feel like mine. So standing there that night, staring at those handprints, My brain kept trying to shove them into that same category. Condensation, reflection, some weird trick of light. Because nothing like that was supposed to happen there. Not in a place where I knew every creak, every shadow, every sound the pipes made when the heat kicked on. I told myself I was tired. I told myself fear does strange things when you wake up too fast in the dark. I told myself that if I wiped the glass clean, whatever I was imagining would disappear along with it. That seemed reasonable, logical. So I went back to the window, grabbed a towel from the bathroom, and reached out to clean it. I wiped the window until my arm hurt. I mean that literally. I scrubbed the glass with a towel, then with a damp cloth, then with my sleeve when I ran out of patience. Nothing resisted me. No grease, no smudge, no residue that suggested something had ever touched it. The glass was cold and clean and ordinary again, and that should have been the end of it. I stood there for a minute longer than necessary, staring at my own reflection, daring it to change. It didn't. Eventually, embarrassment replaced fear. I remember thinking, congratulations, you scared yourself with your own breath. I went back to bed. I don't know how much time passed before I woke up again. Minutes, maybe. An hour. The room was darker this time. The kind of dark that presses against your eyes instead of just sitting there. I rolled onto my side and immediately felt that wrongness again, like noticing a sound that stops the second you focus on it. The handprints were back, not where they'd been before. Higher, just enough that I had to tilt my head to see them clearly. Same shape, same long fingers, same missing finger on the right hand, pressed flat against the inside of the glass like someone had leaned their weight forward. My throat went dry so fast it hurt. I don't have a dog. No cat either. I've thought about that a lot since. There was nothing in the apartment to react for me. No barking, no hissing, no instinctive warning I could pretend to misunderstand. Just silence. The building stayed quiet, faithful to its routine, as if nothing at all had changed. I told myself it was condensation again. That explanation kept trying to save me. Maybe the temperature dropped. Maybe my breath had fogged the glass more than I thought. Maybe wiping it had redistributed something invisible. Stress does weird things, right? Sleep deprivation, too. I reached out and touched the glass. Cold. Solid. The prints didn't smear under my fingers. They didn't move. They didn't react at all. That's when I grabbed my phone. If nothing else, I wanted proof for myself. Something to look at later in daylight and laugh about. I held the camera steady, framed the window, tapped the screen. The image lagged for half a second longer than usual. When it finally appeared, my stomach dropped. The fingers weren't shaped right. On the screen, they looked stretched, blurred sideways like they'd moved during the exposure. Too many joints. The missing finger looked melted at the end, tapering into the glass instead of stopping cleanly. I lowered the phone and looked at the window again. The real prints were still crisp. Normal. Wrong, but consistent. I tried again. Same result. Every photo came out distorted, like the camera couldn't agree on what it was seeing. That was when I noticed something else. The timestamp on my phone said it was just after 2 a.m. I didn't think much of it then. I would later. I wiped the window a second time. Harder. Sloppier. When I finished, my reflection stared back at me alone. The handprints didn't return until the next night. And they didn't show up once during the day. I stopped pretending it was random after the fourth night. By then, I was keeping notes. Not in any official way. No leather-bound journal, no dramatic voice memos, but a mess of timestamps in my phone and scraps of paper on the kitchen counter. Sleep time, wake time, weather, whether the heat was on, whether the window had been wiped clean before bed. I told myself I was doing it to calm down, to prove there was no pattern. That lie lasted exactly 2 entries. Every time, the handprints appeared between 2 and 3 in the morning. Not once before, not once after. If I stayed up past 3, the glass stayed empty. If I fell asleep early, they were there when I woke. If I dozed on the couch and dragged myself to bed at 2:30, they showed up anyway, as if timing mattered more than location. That's when the shapes started changing. Not drastically. Nothing you could point to in a single photo and say, that's different. But when I compared them side by side, night to night, the fingers didn't sit the same way. Sometimes they were straighter. Sometimes one finger bent slightly inward, like it hadn't learned how to flatten properly yet. The missing finger was always missing, though. That never changed. What bothered me most was the spacing. The prints never overlapped. Not even a little. Every set avoided the previous ones by an inch or two, carefully arranged, as if whoever, or whatever, was making them understood where they'd been before and chose not to repeat itself. I bought cheap sensors online, the kind meant for windows and doors. I told myself it was practical, not paranoid. I taped one to the frame and synced it to my phone. For sound, I dug out an old baby monitor a friend had given me as a joke years ago. I placed it on the dresser, pointed toward the window. The first night, nothing triggered. The second night, the monitor crackled at 2:17 a.m. At first, it sounded like interference. Then I realized it had a rhythm. Soft taps, unevenly spaced. Not knocking, more like fingertips brushing glass. There was no pattern I could hum along to. The timing kept shifting, speeding up, slowing down, as if something was testing how sound worked. The window sensor didn't trip. Whatever was touching the glass wasn't opening it, just learning it. I listened to the recording the next morning, sitting in daylight with coffee going cold in my hands. The sound made my skin crawl in a way the handprints never had. You can see something wrong and still doubt it. Sound doesn't give you that luxury. I tried staying awake on purpose after that. I set alarms. I drank too much caffeine. Every time I crossed 3 in the morning, the night passed quietly. No prints. No tapping. The third night I tried this, exhaustion won. I woke up to the sound of fingers sliding slowly across glass, dragging from left to right, close enough that I could hear the faint squeak of skin. There were rules, even though no one explained them to me. That's the part one need you to understand. Nothing ever said what to do. There was no note, no voice, no sudden revelation. The rules settled in quietly, the way instincts do after you've touched something hot once and never need to be reminded again. Rule 1. Don't clean the window before sunrise. I learned that after wiping the glass at 4 in the morning and finding the handprints back before I'd finished brushing my teeth. When I waited until daylight, they didn't reappear until the following night. Cleaning it early felt like erasing something unfinished, like interrupting. Rule 2. Don't acknowledge the prints out loud. I don't mean screaming or panicking. I mean even saying, they're back. The one time I whispered it, to myself, barely audible, the tapping that night was louder, closer together, more confident. Silence worked better. Silence felt safer. Rule 3. Don't fall asleep facing the glass. This one came from trial and error, which I don't recommend. When I slept with my back to the window, the prints stayed where they'd always been, high, distant, just out of reach. The night I rolled over and faced it, I woke up with my breath fogging the pain and the handprints lower than they'd ever been before, right where my chest would have been if the glass weren't there. Those are the rules I'm sure about. There's another one I haven't finished learning yet. I don't know how to say it without feeling stupid, or worse, responsible. It has something to do with attention, with sharing, with how the air feels heavier after someone else knows. I'll let you figure out the shape of that rule on your own. You're already closer than you think. If you're listening to this and you've seen something like this, marks where they shouldn't be, signs that only show up when you're vulnerable, don't test it. Don't joke about it. And whatever you do, don't describe it in detail to someone else just to hear yourself say it out loud. I almost followed all the rules perfectly. Almost. The mistake I made wasn't dramatic. I didn't invite anyone over to see it. I didn't post the photos. I didn't call the police. I just mentioned it, casually, in a late-night message to someone I trusted, because keeping it to myself felt heavier than breaking one small rule. That's when the window reacted differently. I didn't look for confirmation because I wanted it. I looked because I needed to know whether I was losing my mind. It started the way these things always do, a vague search at 2 in the morning, half expecting nothing. I didn't even type handprints. I typed around it. Condensation inside window, marks on glass overnight, prints appearing while sleeping. Safe words, normal words, the kind you can pretend are innocent. The first post I found was on Reddit. Deleted account. No comments visible. Just an image link that still worked. I stared at it longer than I should have. The handprints were identical. Same size. Same spacing. Fingers splayed at the same unnatural angle, like the hands had pressed too carefully, too deliberately. And one hand, always the left, was missing a finger. Not smudged. Not faint. Just absent, as if it had never existed. I remember whispering, "No," like that would undo it. There were more. Buried threads. Archived forums that looked abandoned even by internet standards. Screenshots reposted by people asking if anyone knew what happened to the original poster. The stories were all slightly different. Apartments, houses, dorm rooms. But the details lined up in ways that made my stomach tighten. Always inside the glass. Always at night. Always after sleep. One post ended mid-paragraph. Another user replied weeks later asking if the OP was okay. No answer. A third thread had timestamps that stopped abruptly, followed by a single comment from someone else. They moved. It followed. That one kept me awake. The attached image showed a different window, different frame, different city skyline reflected in the glass. Same handprints. I scrolled until my fingers hurt. Every account either stopped posting entirely or pivoted to unrelated content, like the person was trying to prove to themselves that they still existed outside of it. A few mentioned pets refusing to go near the windows. One mentioned waking up with fingerprints faintly visible on the outside of their eyelids, gone by morning. No one explained what it was. No one solved it. And no one who claimed to confront it ever updated afterward. The relief I felt at not being alone lasted maybe 30 seconds. After that, it curdled into something worse. Because this wasn't random. It wasn't a glitch or stress or coincidence. It was repeatable, documented, shared by people who didn't know each other and had no reason to lie. That meant it was bigger than my apartment. I thought, briefly, about moving. New place, new window, fresh start. But the stories killed that idea fast. The ones who ran didn't escape. They just gave it new glass, new angles, new chances to get closer. So I made a decision that still feels wrong when I say it out loud. I stayed. I stopped searching listings. I stopped imagining a different bedroom. If this thing was marking windows, I wasn't going to give it another one to learn. I closed the laptop, wiped my hands on my jeans, and sat there in the dark, listening to the faint, patient sound of fingers tapping somewhere just beyond the glass. I told myself I was researching for closure, that if I understood where this place came from, I could understand what was happening to me. That knowledge might make it smaller, containable, harmless in the way things become harmless once you name them. That was a lie. The building's public records were easy enough to find. Old municipal scans, grainy PDFs with crooked text and coffee stains immortalized by bad archiving. Built in the late 40s. Renovated twice. No major incidents listed. No fires, no collapses, nothing dramatic enough to justify the way my skin prickled as I scrolled. The blueprints were stranger. There were interior corridors that didn't exist anymore, or maybe never officially did. Long, narrow sections labeled only as maintenance access, sealed off during renovations, and never reopened. Windows marked on internal walls where windows shouldn't be. Notes in the margins, handwritten and then scanned, questioning sight lines. Lines of sight. Visibility. I checked my apartment layout 3 times before I realized one of those sealed corridors would have run directly behind my bedroom wall. Tenant records were harder. Names crossed out. Move-out dates without move-in dates. One unit, mine, had an unusually high turnover rate. People stayed less than a year, some only a few months. The reasons varied: relocation, financial hardship, personal circumstances. One file simply read, "Did not return keys." That was the first time I saw the phrase, "window people." It appeared in a complaint from the 70s, typed on yellowed paper and scanned crooked. The tenant described shapes at the glass, hands pressing from the wrong side, movement that didn't match reflections. The report ended with a note from building management advising them to keep curtains closed at night. Another complaint from the 90s mentioned photographs. Polaroids of handprints. Same missing finger. Same spacing. The images were attached, degraded by time, but unmistakable. The hands hadn't changed. Not in size. Not in shape. Not in placement. I leaned back from my screen and laughed once, sharp and humorless. That was when I noticed the scratches. They were carved into the wooden window frame, hidden beneath layers of paint. Thin, frantic lines gouged deep enough that even decades of repainting hadn't erased them completely. I scraped gently with my fingernail until letters emerged. "Don't watch them back." The sentence repeated over and over, spiraling downward as if the person writing it had lost control of their hand. Near the bottom, the letters deteriorated into jagged marks that might have been words once, or might have been fingernails slipping. I sat there longer than I meant to, thinking about the people who had lived here before me. How they must have noticed the same things. How they must have told themselves the same lies. I wondered how many of them had stood exactly where I was standing, convinced that understanding would save them. That's when the glass creaked. Softly, deliberately. I turned just in time to see a new handprint forming on the inside of the window, fingers pressing outward one by one, slow and careful, as if whatever was on the other side wanted to make sure I was watching. I don't know why I did it. That's the part that bothers me the most, looking back. There was no slip, no accident. I wasn't startled into it. I didn't trip or lose my balance. I stood there, fully awake, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat, and I made a decision. I raised my hand and pressed it against the glass. The cold shocked me first. Not just cool, but biting, like metal left outside in winter. My palm flattened where the new print was still forming, my fingers aligning almost perfectly with the shape on the window. Almost. The proportions were wrong. Too long in the middle fingers, too narrow at the base. And when I leaned closer, I realized something worse. The print pressed back. Not hard, not aggressive, just enough to let me know there was pressure on the other side, meeting mine. The glass bowed slightly between us. I felt it give. My breath hitched, fogging the pane in a soft oval. Another patch of fog bloomed opposite mine. It came from the wrong side. I yanked my hand away, but the print stayed. The warmth stayed. The glass where it had touched was no longer cold. It was almost body temperature, like skin after being covered too long. I should have run then. I should have backed away, grabbed my phone, done anything except stare. But my reflection had started to misbehave. At first it was subtle, my face lagging half a second behind my movements. I tilted my head, and the reflection followed late, like a bad video call. Then it smiled. I hadn't. Something darker moved behind it, just beneath the surface of the glass. Not a shape I could describe, not a face or a body, but a sense of depth where there shouldn't have been any. As if the window wasn't a flat surface at all, but a thin membrane stretched tight over something that could push against it. The handprint shifted, fingers dragging downward with a faint, wet squeak that set my teeth on edge. One finger lifted, bent, and tapped once against the glass from the inside. Tap. I backed away until my calves hit the bed. My breathing sounded too loud in the room, every inhale scraping my lungs raw. The fog on the window thickened, spreading outward in uneven bursts, as if whatever was there was breathing harder now. Faster. Stop, I whispered, before I could think better of it. The tapping ceased. For one horrible moment, I thought that meant it was listening, that it understood. Then the warmth vanished, sucked out of the glass, so quickly frost spiderwebbed across the pane. The hand withdrew in reverse, fingers peeling away one by one until only the missing finger gap remained, lingering like an afterimage burned into my eyes. The window went still. No fog, no movement, just my reflection again, shaking, pale, alone. I stood there for a long time, waiting for something else to happen, my nerves stretched so tight they ached. I almost convinced myself it was over, that I'd crossed a line, paid the price, and been spared. Then there was a knock, not on the glass, from inside the wall behind it. 3 slow raps, muffled and hollow, as if something on the other side was trying to remember how knocking was supposed to sound. After the knocking stopped, the apartment felt wrong in a way I still don't have words for. Not quiet, empty, like the sound had been scooped out of the air and left the pressure behind. My ears rang. The hum of electricity was gone. Even the city outside my window seemed to hold its breath. That's when I realized something important. It wasn't trying to scare me anymore. It was waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand, recording audio, my eyes never leaving the window. The red timer ticked upward in the corner of the screen. 10 minutes. 20. Nothing happened. No prints. No fog. Just glass. Around 3:12 a.m., a soft sound came through the speakers when I played it back. Not tapping. Not knocking. Breathing. Slow. Careful. Like whoever, or whatever, was doing it was afraid of being heard. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was random. I tried writing first. I tore a page from a notebook and held it up to the window, my hand shaking so badly the paper rattled. What do you want? The glass stayed blank for nearly a minute, long enough for hope to start creeping in, thin and stupid. Then a single handprint appeared, right where the paper touched the pane. Another followed, and another. They didn't smear. They placed themselves deliberately, one after the other, until they formed shapes. Letters. Not written. Pressed. I stepped back as the word finished forming, every hair on my arms standing straight up. Hello. My mouth went dry. My first instinct was to speak, to answer like a reflex, but something deep and animal inside me locked my jaw shut. Instead, I wrote another note with shaking hands. You can't come in. The response came faster this time. The letters appeared sloppier, overlapping, as if patience was thinning. Not yet. That's when the pattern clicked into place. The reason the prints never overlapped before. The reason they appeared one at a time, night after night. The reason one finger was always missing. These weren't attempts. They were records. A list. I spent the next 2 days digging through everything I'd saved. Screenshots from forums, archived posts, photos people had uploaded before their accounts went dark. I counted fingers, measured spacing, compared heights on the glass. Every set of prints was different. Every set belonged to someone else. Except the newest ones, which matched mine perfectly. Buried in a dead thread from years ago, I found a comment someone had replied to only once before deleting their account. It was just one sentence, easy to miss. It only works if you answer it like a person. I understood then. Fully. Horribly. It didn't break in. It didn't crawl through cracks or smash glass. It waited to be invited, not with politeness, but with recognition, conversation, acknowledgement, the kind you give another human being without thinking twice. Someone before me had done that, spoken out loud, named it, treated it like something that could listen, and the handprints were proof of everyone who had stood where I was standing now, right up until they said the wrong thing. That night, the knocking came again, louder this time, closer, the glass fogged in steady pulses, breath syncing with mine. Letters bloomed across the window in frantic succession. Please, I've been here longer than you. Let me finish. I pressed my hands over my ears and slid down against the wall, eyes squeezed shut, refusing to look, refusing to read the rest. Every instinct screamed at me to respond, to end the tension, to do something. Silence felt like drowning, but I understood the last rule now. As long as I didn't fully acknowledge it, as long as I didn't answer back, it couldn't cross that final distance. The handprints slammed against the glass, hard enough to rattle the frame. The knocking turned into fists, then palms, then something flatter, heavier, dragging downward as if it were trying to push its way through by force alone. I stayed silent. Eventually, the sounds faded. The fog thinned. The prints receded, leaving only faint outlines, like scars beneath the surface. When morning came, the window was clear again, but the newest handprint, mine, remained. Waiting. Life didn't fall apart after that night. That's the part one still struggles to explain to people, how normal everything looks if you don't know where to look. I still wake up, still go to work, still pay rent on time. The world didn't crack open. The sky didn't change color. No one knocked on my door asking questions. But I don't look directly at the window anymore. I pass it like you pass a stranger on a dark street. Eyes forward, pretending nothing's wrong while every nerve in your body stays alert. I know where the handprints are without seeing them. I've memorized their placement the way you memorize a scar on your own skin. Chest height, slightly right of center. Fingers spread, one missing, like a permanent accusation pressed into the glass. They haven't faded. Dust settles around them. Condensation forms everywhere else. Sunlight hits the window at different angles throughout the day, and the prints remain untouched, perfectly clear, as if the glass itself refuses to forget them. I stopped trying to clean it. I don't even bring a cloth near it anymore. The one time I considered it, the temperature in the room dropped so suddenly my breath fogged in front of my face. At night, I sleep with the lights on. Not just a lamp, a full, harsh overhead glow that leaves nowhere for shadows to gather. It doesn't stop anything, but it makes me feel less alone. Sometimes I wake up around 2:30 a.m. without knowing why, heart racing, ears straining for sound. I don't turn my head. I don't check the time. I don't acknowledge the faint pressure change in the room that tells me something new has happened. Because sometimes, when I force myself to look in the morning, there's another print. Not replacing the old ones. Beside them, different size, different spacing, another missing finger. I don't know who they belong to. I don't know where those people are now. I just know the glass keeps a record, and it's running out of space. Friends say I look tired. I tell them I've been sleeping badly. That part's true. What I don't tell them is that I've rearranged my entire life around one rule: never give it my full attention again. I don't talk about it out loud. I don't stand still in front of the window. I don't let my reflection line up with the prints. From the outside, my apartment looks exactly the same as it always has. Warm lights, closed curtains, nothing worth noticing. From the inside, it feels like living next to a mouth that almost learned how to say my name. And every morning, when I leave for work, I lock the door behind me and wonder, not if something will happen, but whether it's still being patient. Because patience, I've learned, is the most dangerous thing it has. I'm telling you this part directly, because pretending this is just a story would be another lie. If you live anywhere with windows, an apartment, a house, a dorm, a hotel, you should check them tonight. Not tomorrow. Not after you finish this video. Tonight, when the lights are low and the glass reflects more than it should. Look for condensation that doesn't match the room. Look for fingerprints that aren't smudged, aren't oily, aren't yours. Look higher than you'd expect. Look at the spacing of the fingers. Count them. Pay attention to your pets, too. Dogs that refuse to settle. Cats that stare at the glass like it's breathing. Animals don't need proof. They just need presence. I wish I could tell you this only happens in old buildings, or bad neighborhoods, or places with a history. It doesn't. I've seen posts from new apartments, renovated condos, houses built last year. Different cities, different countries, same handprints, same missing finger, same silence after someone says they're going to clean it. If you think you've seen something like this before and dismissed it, steam from a shower, stress, a trick of the light, that's the point. It doesn't need you to believe. It just needs you to notice. If you have your own experience, write it down. Share it in the comments. Compare details. Finger spacing, height, time of night. That's how patterns form. That's how we know it isn't random. Just don't post photos of your reflection in the glass. Trust me on that. And if you check your window and see nothing, don't relax too much. Absence doesn't mean safety. Sometimes it just means you're earlier in the process than I was. I still don't know what happens when the glass fills up. I don't know what happens when there's no room left. I only know this. If you see handprints on the inside of your window, don't wipe them away. It means it's already found you.